And our recording has been started, so we should be all set. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever is appropriate for all of you out in the audience, given our worldwide customer base out there. My name is Wally Mead. I'm a Principal Program Manager with Cireson. I've been with Cireson for just over 3 years now. After coming from Microsoft, I was at Microsoft in the Configuration Manager product group primarily for 22 years, so know Configuration Manager pretty well, and came over to Cireson to help them in their Systems Center endeavors, specifically getting more into Configuration Manager. So the topic of our webinar today is on getting started with your Configuration Manager portal. So I'm assuming that everyone that has joined us has either has already heard about our Configuration Manager portal and has either downloaded the trial version or is in a trial scenario or downloaded the Community Edition or gone on our evaluation site, the trial site, to go ahead and play around. So if that's not the case, I apologize. It's just what my assumption is. And hopefully that it fits in nicely. So what we're going to do is just get cruising along with this. So a couple of housekeeping items for you. You guys are in a listen-only mode, so you're not going to be able to ask questions verbally, but you do have the questions panel in your GoToWebinar interface. So at any time throughout the presentation that you have questions, feel free to go ahead and type them in. I don't plan on answering questions throughout the webinar, because if I look at the questions panel, it's going to distract me. And I don't like getting distracted, but I will set aside plenty of time at the end to handle Q&A. That's one of the big topics of today's webinar, is letting you guys ask questions based on the assumption, again, that you're either trialing or evaluating the product through the Community Edition, or, again, a trial environment, or through the evaluation site we have. The video is our presentation is being recorded, and you will be able to get access to the recording probably tomorrow. It'll be up on our Vimeo site, so vimeo.com/Team Cireson, all one word, and you'll be able to find numerous different presentations out there for myself and others on the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager, including this one will be up there very shortly. So again, feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. If I happen to look at the questions panel and see a question throughout, I will go ahead and address it. But other than that, I will, again, have set aside time at the end to go ahead and handle questions. So okay, our agenda for today is, first off, we'll do a quick overview of the CMP version 2 overview. So I'll do a very, very quick run through of what version 1 had, and then talk about the highlights of what version 2 included. I want to concentrate on the Community Edition, as I know a number of you may have already downloaded and are playing around with the Community Edition, and some of you may be in a trial environment with the Team Edition. So I'll explain the difference between those two different editions for you. I want to walk you through a little bit the installation process, because I know some people have had some challenges or questions on the installation of the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager. Then I want to spend a significant amount of time on frequently asked questions. So what are some of the questions we've been getting from customers, as well as for those who are evaluating the product? So I'll spend some time going through that, and that's a great time for you guys to go ahead and submit questions as well. I want to talk about some tips and tricks, or once you've got this guy installed, what do you do next type scenarios. And as I mentioned, I want to spend a lot of time at the end on letting you guys ask questions and having me respond with as much as I can on those questions. So hopefully the presentation will be a little bit shorter presentation and appropriate demos, and then spending a lot of time on those last 3 bullets. Frequently asked questions, tips and tricks to get you moving along further, and as well as letting you guys ask questions. So again, at any point throughout the presentation, go ahead and type up questions that you have in the questions panel, and I'll get to those down in the Q&A section. All right, so first, CMP V2 overview. So we have just recently released version 2 of the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager, or as we refer to it, the CMP Configuration Manager portal. So the version 2, and we're actually up to version 2.03, so we've had a couple of hot fixes that have come out, and I'll explain those as we get further along. It has all the original features that you guys might have seen from the initial release that came out very earlier this year. So things like to be able to, and you can see a little screenshot there in the little window, being able to manage computers, being able to manage users, create and deploy software, being able to look at reports, create and deploy task sequences, look at our event system, launch off external tools for your computers. So manage your configuration manager environment primarily around the aspects of software distribution, operating system deployments. So all those things are still there. We still have the role-based administration internally in the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager, as well as the integration capabilities with the Configuration Manager role-based administration, the ability of looking at reports and creating our own templates to control the creation and deployment aspects of software through the CMP. So all that stuff is still there. We've enhanced on it, however, with some new things. So now we've created a Community Edition, which again, I know a number of you have probably downloaded the Community Edition, and that's why you're here to learn more about it. So I'll explain what the Community Edition is. We've included an installer. In the first release of the product, it was a complete manual process to go through to get the product installed and configured appropriately. And now we have an installer that will help automate a number of those tasks. We have a dashboard as a high-level first stop experience to see what the status of your deployments, your clients, your patch scenarios are. Some enhancements to our external tools capabilities to allow you to launch off webhook APIs for maybe Azure automation, or being able to launch off from a browser to a specific computer or user or piece of software and to a specific tab in a new browser session. And then a new feature that we're very excited about, which we have labeled here as Commence integration. And I'll explain more about Commence in the slide, but basically it's an OSD or operating system deployment front end to pop up and provide users some level of integration or interaction with the operating system deployment experience. So let's go ahead and jump into these. So first off, the Community Edition versus the Team Edition. So again, a number of you may have downloaded the Community Edition from our website. So the Community Edition is, in essence, a read-only view into your Configuration Manager environment. It will let you view information from Configuration Manager, such as computers, specifically clients, Configuration Manager clients, the configuration of those clients, what software you have targeted to them, inventory summaries, so the hardware and the software, patch status attributes of those clients. Same thing for users, the ability of seeing what users you have, what software you've created in the Configuration Manager environment, including task sequences. However, this is a read-only view, so you're allowed to pull that information from Configuration Manager, but in the Community Edition, you're not allowed to create anything that would impact or be written back to Configuration Manager. So I can't create new computers, I can't create deployments, I can't deploy software or task sequences, I can't manage user device affinity relationships, I can't create clones of new computers or clean computers. So all that stuff are things that would get written back to Configuration Manager eventually, and you're not allowed to do that with the Community Edition. You can, however, create CMP-specific items, such as views, so different views of computers or users or software. You could create your security scenario, or what I have listed on the slide here is role-based administration, RBA. I can set up security groups and then define which navigation nodes that they would have access to, and being able to test out the security scenarios with the CMP. You can create templates. So you could create templates. You're not really going to be able to use them in this Community Edition because you can't create software, deploy software, but you can create templates, you can create deployment scopes, and so on. So those things that are CMP specific, you can still go ahead and create inside the Community Edition. However, anything that would affect Configuration Manager will not be allowed to do. Now, if you have the Community Edition and you've seen that you like it and you want to convert it over to the Team Edition, it can very easily be converted over into the Licensed Edition or the Full Edition, or what we're calling the Team Edition. So let me show you what that looks like. So let me go jump over to my one of my demo environments that we're looking at today. And I assume you all can see my screen still. Looks like in my view of what you guys can see, I see my VM. So this is one of my demo environments that I'm going to work with today. And this one is currently in the Community Edition. So a couple of different ways I can tell that. If I look in the upper left-hand corner, I see after the title, Config Man Portal, I see where it says Community Edition. So this is a label that's designating specifically that this is the Community Edition or the free read-only version. In the upper right-hand corner next to my logged on username, I have this big blue button here that says Unlock Features. So Unlock Features would allow me to go out there and convert or get a license from Cireson and convert my Community Edition or the read-only edition over to the fully licensed or fully functional edition, which we call the Team Edition. Also in the navigation menu on the left-hand side, you see the dashboard, which you see right here. I can see computers, users, software, task sequences, but notice that a couple of these items, where did I lose my mouse? There's my mouse. So you see that deployments and reports are locked out. There's a lock icon on them. So I'm not allowed to view my deployment status with that node or look at reports. Now if I go click on a computer, so I go click on the computers node, and when I see my list of computers, I'll see all my Configuration Manager clients. If I right click one of those computers, you notice that almost all of my actions are grayed out, and you see the lock icon on them. So those are actions that I cannot perform in the Community Edition. I can, however, click Inventory Summary. So we are going to let you see your basic attributes about a client computer, including Inventory Summary. There we go. So I clicked on Client 7, so it's loading the Inventory Summary screen for Client 7. So I can go ahead and see its basic summary information, its hardware information, software, configuration, network client status, and then the client tab, which include my software update status, what collections I'm a member of, and so on. So I can go ahead and view those, but I can't go ahead and perform any of their actions. All of the nodes down at the bottom, these tabs, are active, however. So I can view the information that we've collected from Configuration Manager, but again, I can't perform any of those actions that would impact Configuration Manager. If I have any different views, I can go ahead and still use those views and filter out to my appropriate clients or workstations or servers and so on. So I can go ahead and view, create and still use views. So that's fine. And notice on the lower left-hand corner, there's no new button. So I can't create new objects, no new computers, new software, new deployments, new MDT roles, new task sequences, and so on. So that's basically what the Community Edition is. It's pulling information from Configuration Manager. It's bringing that into the CMP Community Edition, allowing me to see that information, but not allowing me to create any information that's going to affect Configuration Manager. Now, I mentioned it's very easy to convert this back over to the fully licensed edition or the Team Edition. To do that, I would click the Unlock Features button. Now, my environment is not on the internet, so I can't physically get to Cireson.com to request a key, but I already have a key. Once you get a key, you just go to your logged on username, go to General Settings, go to License, and then you notice that the Community Edition uses a no license, so a license key of all zeros. Punch in a valid license key that you get from Cireson, click Validate, and you can see my license is going to expire tomorrow, and it's only good for 10 clients. Click Save Settings, and now my Community Edition has switched over to the Team Edition. So now you can see that the Community Edition is gone, that Unlock Features is gone. I now have the New button, so I can go ahead and create these new objects. I can look at my deployment status. Let me get rid of the New button, going away, and go down to where I've created some deployments. I can see my deployment status. I can go ahead and click on reports, and I can go ahead and access any of the Configuration Manager reports that I've integrated with. I can go to a client computer, and all those same right-click actions that were grayed out before, I now have access to all those right-click actions, provided that I'm logged on with a user account that has rights to those. So it's very easy to switch between the Community Edition and the Team Edition, or vice versa. Not that I really know why you'd want to go from the Team Edition down to the Community Edition. Okay, so that's Community Edition. It's there just as a freebie for you to try out and see if you think it's going to work for you. Obviously, you can't create those new objects, but you can go ahead and talk to Cireson, and we can get you a trial license if you want to convert from the Community Edition read-only over to the fully functional edition for a 30-day time period where you can now create those objects inside your environment that would affect Configuration Manager. Okay, so maybe you've downloaded the Community Edition, but you've not gotten to the point of installing it yet. So let's go ahead and talk about the installation process. There are two different ways of installing the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager. One of those ways is through the manual installation process, and some of you may have been around and tried this out in the version 1 of the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager. It wasn't a complicated process, it was just a long process. We have a fully functional document that walks you through step by step everything you had to do, including tons of screenshots, which made the document look really big, just because all the screenshots that we put in there. But we decided to go ahead and create an installer in version 2. So the installer completes the vast majority of those required manual steps from a previous type installation, or if you want still doing that with version 2. It creates the website and application pool, configures them as we recommend and require. It does allow you some port configuration, so you can designate that. It completes the vast majority of the tasks you would implement on your own in SQL Server. So it'll create the CMP database, it'll create your security login for your application pool account. It'll set security on the Configuration Manager and the CMP databases. It'll run the required scripts to get things configured for you. It installs our service that we have and we require. So it'll complete all those steps. There's still a few things you have to do manually on your own because we don't know that you're going to have rights to do that, or assuming it's going to be another team like the DNS team or the Active Directory team and so on. You can still perform a manual installation if you prefer to do so. So here's a screenshot of the installer, but let me just go ahead and show you what the installer looks like. So if I go over to my other demo environment that I have, it's a Configuration Manager current branch environment. It's a technical preview technically, but here's the installer files. I've downloaded them from the Cireson website, and this is again version 203. And I've gone ahead and extracted those out. So I'm just going to go ahead and run the Cireson Configuration Manager portal installer. So if I go ahead and launch that off, let me just go ahead and minimize that side of the background. So here's our getting started. You can install all components, or if you select what components you want, all components are going to have all these selected. So install the database configuration, install your website and app pool, install the required service, and then integrate with MDT. So if I want to go ahead and take all of those, so my database name is primary, so I type that in. As soon as you move off that field, it does your validation. We want FQDN here, so I'll put in Cireson primary, CiresonDemo.com. My database name for Configuration Manager is CM_TPS, and that's all validated. Now in my CMP database, I want to use the same SQL Server. I want to create a database by the name of ConfigMan Portal, which obviously you can designate that. I'm going to use Windows authentication as opposed to SQL authentication. I did select MDT integration. So let me go ahead and specify primary as my database or my server, and my database name is called MDT. And I've supplied all the required information there. So I click next. My app pool identity, I've got an account, Cireson Demo, and my account is CMP account. That we won't create for you. You have to create that on your own. And the password for it. Now for the license key, if you don't have a license key, if you leave it blank, it's going to install the Community Edition. If you have a valid license key, punch that in, it will install the trial or the Team Edition appropriately. And then what's the Global Administrators group? I'm going to use administrators. Notice there's a yellow triangle after advanced website settings, indicating the website port 80 is already in use. So I can go ahead and change this to, say, port 81. And I'm going to create a folder called config-man portal inside c:\inetpub. Then lastly, my service that we require, I'm going to use local system and use the default ports. Click next. I get my license agreement. You guys certainly want to read that. I'll just go ahead and click install. It kicks off with the installer. Now, I'm not going to sit here and watch this. It runs for a few minutes. It has a required reboot in the middle, and then you have to restart the installer. So that's the version 2 of installer. Now we're working on that. We're getting rid of the required reboot unless we know you have to have one. So we're making some changes here for the installer, but the current version that you can download today, this is what the experience is. You go through this and it's going to pop up and say, hey, you're almost done. Please shut down or restart your computer, rerun setup. It'll remember all your settings other than your passwords you might have supplied, and then it will allow you to finish off the installation process. So here's the part where it's done, and I'm just going to go ahead and kick off a restart of my computer, and then we'll go back over to slides and we'll come back over here and kick off the rest of the installation process to finish off that installer. Okay, so CMP V2 Dashboard. So you saw this when we looked at the Community Edition. We've now added this in version 2, which is a dashboard. So this dashboard gives you a high-level overview of what your configuration manager environment looks like. So across the top, you have some static statistics, static in that they're just stats, but they will adjust according to the information you get from Configuration Manager. The total number of computers you have in your environment, the total number of users you have synced from Config Manager, what your client health percentage and rates are, what your current client activity rate is. So those aren't charts, those are just the statistics up at the top. Then you have 4 charts that are available to you: clients by CMP status, clients by operating system, your deployment status information, and computers with missing updates by severity. Now, these dashboards in the current version are not customizable and they're not drill-inable. However, we do have tool tips or highlights. When you highlight a section of it, it'll pop up and give you more information on that. So let's go ahead and look at that. So before we do that, let's go ahead and kick our installer back off to get the rest of that installation of the portal done. So if I go back to my install directory, which is download, Cireson portal, portal installer, then launch off our portal again. And again, in the next release of the installer that we have coming out, if you don't really need the reboot, it won't do the reboot. It currently does. And we'll just do all components. Notice that it remembers everything that I had supplied. I do have to resupply my password, although in the next release we are going to remember the password as well. We're going to hash it into a file. And everything's there, so now I just click next and finish this guy off, and it's going to go ahead and finish off my installation. Now, one other requirement in the installer is that it does require a minimum of .NET 4.5.2. So when you start the installer for the first time, if you've not got .NET 4.5.2 or later installed, it's going to take you to the Microsoft website to go ahead and download and install .NET 4.5.2. You'll have to reboot your computer, then start the installer again, and then it will go ahead and proceed in through. So we'll let this guy finish. We'll come back here momentarily. So let's switch over to my other environment that is already installed. And as we already saw, again, here's the dashboard. So it's telling me I have 7 computers discovered by Config Manager, 9 users. I'm at 71% client health and 71% client activity. Now, that's that static information that gets updated through Config Manager. Then in the charts, here's clients by status. This is really clients by CMP status, which is a little bit different than our client activity. And you can see that as I hover over that, I get the little indicator down here that pops up there. All 6 of my clients are active. If I go to clients by operating system, you can see as I hover over any of those, I get the little indicator that matches my legend just gives me the numbers that validate along with that. So again, that's what the dashboard looks like in version 2. In future versions, we plan on making this customizable, so you'll be able to put in your own dashboards, designate which dashboard's available to which users. Currently, either see all the dashboard or nothing of the dashboard in security scheme, and maybe even be able to click on that and drill into, from that chart, pie chart or whatever it is, into the appropriate data behind the scenes on that. So that's our dashboard. Before we go back, let's go ahead and see where our installer is. You can see that the installer says it's all done. There is a log file that you can open up if you want to. You can launch the portal off directly. And you may not get any data inside your dashboard initially. You have to wait until the service gets running, and then it pulls information from Configuration Manager. I'll go ahead and add this. And there you see I don't have any data currently from Configuration Manager, but you can see it will come. But you can see it's got Community Edition in the upper left. It's got the unlock features. My deployments and my reports are locked out because I didn't give it a license key. So that's the installation process. Other than that, it's a fully functional environment. Just have to wait until it gets all the information synced from Configuration Manager. Okay. All right, another thing that we've added into V2, now this is not applicable for your Community Edition. So those of you that are using the Community Edition, you're not going to be able to try out commence because this is an OSD front end. It's obviously deploying operating system task sequences, which you can't do through the Community Edition. But commence is a OSD front end for either bare metal provisioning or for existing client operating system deployments. So if you're in a bare metal or unknown computer scenario, it'll go through an installation process. If you're in an existing client scenario, it goes into reinstall mode and will let you reinstall an operating system. So it has standard naming conventions that you'll see here momentarily, but in essence what it does, it ties into this screenshot here, which is OSD templates, which is a feature of the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager. You can create templates, and here's a template for Copenhagen computers. It gives you a naming format. So in this case, it says we're going to create a computer name by default of CPHWS for Copenhagen Workstation, and we're going to add 4 numerical digits after that using the Copenhagen computers number sequence that has been created. You can specify the site code you want to join if you have multiple site codes, what target collection you want to join, what your OU is if you have MDT integrated. You can specify your MDT roles you want to go ahead and create and install automatically. Now here's a screenshot of the commence front end. So, and I'll show you this live momentarily here. It has a number of different tabs for you to go ahead and look at information, but it basically gives you an OSD front end to allow you to interact as an end user with the operating system deployment process. It does have role-based access control, so you can configure which computers which users you want to be able to use commence to do bare metal provisioning or to be able to reinstall their clients. You can even decommission computers. That's the last tab here where you say this computer it's gone through its life cycle. We're going to go ahead and donate it to charity, so I want to go ahead and clean it off. So you can go ahead and decommission a computer with commence as well. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and see if this is going to work. As you know, sometimes config manager and networking with Pixie doesn't always work as efficiently as you want it to, and hopefully this didn't time out. So I've gone ahead and already loaded the boot image just because it takes a while to load that. So here's our front end for commence asking me to log in just to verify that I have rights to access commence and perform a provisioning scenario. So provided I typed in my proper credentials, and this hasn't timed out on me. And let's see, it may have timed out on me. I may have to restart this guy because it usually does not take that long to pop back up at the front end. So I may have had this guy loaded. Oh, no, okay, there it goes. All right, so here's our OSD front end. So you have a series of tabs across the top. So the first one is name. It allows me as the user to go ahead and select what OSD template I want to use. I have 2 in my environment, new servers and new workstation. I'm going to install Windows 10, so I want a new workstation. Notice how the name gets generated for me automatically. That's based on the number sequence that's tied to that template. So here it says WKS002. If we're at new servers, it's SRV021. So I'll go back to workstations, and then I click operating system. Now I can pick which task sequence I want. So here I have a collection Windows 10 deployment and install Windows 10 as my task sequence. As soon as I pick that, we tell the end user what the task sequence name is, it's required, what the operating system is it's going to install in that environment. If I want to do a UDA relationships, I can go ahead and start typing in my username. It'll filter for me. I can specify my site code. Now I have one site code in my environment. If I have MDT integrated, I can go ahead and select my OU if I have OUs identified in my environment. And I can create any MDT roles, which is basically a set of software I want to install automatically, and select those, provided I've been given access to that. You have an inventory tab. The inventory tab is real-time inventory of the clients you're running the comments off of. So you can verify that, oh yeah, I only got a gig of memory. That's not going to be enough to install Windows 10 or Windows Server, whatever happens to be on it. But I can look at some basic inventory properties. If I'm all done, I just click next. The last tab is a decommission tab where I would say, go ahead and decommission this computer, and I would do a quick format, a normal format, or a very slow secure format that would zero out the hard drive after formatting. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off the installation. Here gives me a summary. I click next. Now it's going to create this computer inside Config Manager. Once it does that, it's going to add it to the appropriate collection. Remember that Windows 10 deployments collection. And now it's created the computer in Config Manager. It's got the task sequence. So then it's going to go ahead and exit commence, and we'll go ahead and load up that task sequence that has been targeted. This computer's been added to that appropriate collection. So this is going to exit here in just a second, and then it'll just go into the normal OSD scenario. It just allows the end user that little bit of interaction to pick the task sequence, provided you want them to do that. Now in Config Manager, if I go look at my Config Manager environment, and if I go to Config Manager and then go to Devices, we'll see that I have that device, which is WKS002, has been created. And we added them to the collection Windows 10 deployments. You can see I have one member in there. If I show members, there's WKS002. And this collection has, right here, it has a OSD task sequence of install Windows 10 targeted to it. So that's what should be kicking off on that computer right now. There you see that task sequence loading. And now it's going through the WinPE for that specific boot image for that specific operating system. So that's what commence looks like. All right, so those are just a little bit of time I wanted to spend on some of the high-level features of version 2 of the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager, just for those of you that weren't aware what those features are, so that you are able to start playing around with those and do proper evaluations of that. Now again, if you are using the Community Edition, you're going to be limited on what you can really test out. It's just your integration with Config Manager and then viewing the information that is pulled over from it. So let's go through some frequently asked questions that we get from some of our customers that are testing out the product, and then some tips and tricks, and then let you guys ask some questions. So go ahead and start getting your questions ready so we can go through those in a few minutes. So installation. So some people have asked what's better to do. Is it better to do the installer in version 2, or is it better to do a manual installation? And that's going to be something you're going to have to decide on your own. I can't really answer that for you. Now, I've been doing the manual installation process probably 100 times. So for me, it's just as quick doing the manual installation process because I've got it memorized. Really, all you have to do is you download the files, extract them, create an account in Active Directory, which you have to do even with the installer, create your DNS record, which still you have to do even with the installer, because we don't know that you're going to have rights to do that stuff in AD. It may be another team you have to go and interact with to get the account, your IIS app pool account as was called in the installer. So you create the account, you create the DNS record, you download the files, you create the website, you configure some settings in the website, you configure some settings in your app pool, you load SQL Management Studio, you create a database, you create a login, you set some security, you run a few scripts to populate the initial schema of that database, you install the service and start the service. So realistically, that's what you're doing inside a manual installation process. So if you're fine with doing all that stuff manually, we have a very, very detailed installation guide which walks you through the process of the installer, of the manual installation process. I don't know what that was, but a little something caught in my throat. So it's 100 and some pages long, but that's because of not the complexity or anything, it's just because of the number of screenshots. We have a screenshot for every single little thing you need to do in IIS, inside file security, inside SQL, inside running the installer for the service, and so on. Now, you saw the installation process. It's not a hard installer going through the installer process. So if you want to do that, absolutely more power to you. I actually created a video, about a 10-minute video that walks you completely through the installation process of the installer. So that's available up on the vimeo.com/Team Cireson site that I'll show you a little bit later on. So it doesn't really matter to me which one you use, whichever one you're more comfortable with. Just because I've done it enough, again, I'm going to use the manual installation process because there's still a couple of things inside the installer that you have to do manually to get things set the way you want. Like set permissions to the MDT database inside SQL, set permissions to the report server database that you have to do. You still have to go in and create your bindings inside IIS for the website. So there's some manual process you still have to go through even if you use the installer, but the installer will take care of the vast majority of those processes, provided that you're got IIS on the box that you want to have the CMP installed on. Okay, next is access to the CMP. So who can use the portal? Well, by default, the only people that can use the portal are those that are designated as, so there you can see our OSD task sequence is running it. It's implying the install.wim for my OSD task sequence. But if you go to your portal, and I'll go back to full screen mode, and if I go to general, sorry, not general settings, I want to go to security settings, and then go to global administrator. So by default, only members of the group that are designated as the global administrators group are able to log on and access the portal by default. So you will have to be a member of that group. And if you remember when we walked through the installer, that was one of the things it asked us for, which is our portal administrator group. And it's what we call in the UI here, the global administrator group. So you'll have to remember what group you put there and then go ahead and log in as somebody in that group. Now it can be a local group, it can be a domain group, whatever you want to use there. Now, if some people have forgotten what they put there, so they don't know, and so they're not able to log in because you can't get to the security settings until you log in with somebody with account rights to do so. So if you have forgotten what account you used, you can go ahead, and this is one of those tips and tricks, you could go to your installation directory, in my case is drive C, inet pub, config manager space portal, because this is the one I installed manually, not the installed with the installer, and then go to the configuration.xml file. So go ahead and load configuration.xml, and then go down to the security section. So go to that log file. It's down towards the bottom of the configuration file, and you'll find a security section. And what you would need to do is change the secure server operator group name. So go ahead and set this name, in this case it says administrators, to whatever group that you want to use. You don't have to worry about the second one that says system administrator group down below that right at the end of the arrow. Just do the top one, server operator group. So go ahead and change that to a group. Obviously, you'd have to have rights to this installation directory, and then you can go ahead and change that to set that to a group that you know and can remember, and then log in as a member of that group. And then, if you need to, you would be able to go into here and then change to some other group, let's say SMS admins, and just click Save Settings. and that will go ahead and save those settings. That will change that into in that file. So in that file now, down here, oops, the bottom one. So change the bottom one. Sorry about that. So change the bottom one, SMS admins. So that'll get changed for you. All right. So from there, once you have created you've got your global administrator group set, then you want to go ahead and secure your environment. So you want to give access to other people inside that portal. And to do that, you're going to go back into your environment, go back into the CMP. You're going to go and create security groups. So this is logical names for real security groups from Active Directory. You're going to add those in. And then once you've done that, it's just a matter of clicking Add Security Group, give it your logical name, and then your AD group name. Could be a user. And then you go to Security Rights. And in Security Rights, you go ahead and pick whatever security group, like Help Desk. And then you give them the appropriate area rights, which is your navigation menu, New, which is your new menu down here, and then Settings, which are these settings in the upper right-hand corner on the drop-down username. You go and select whichever one of those attributes and options you want to have available to members of that security group. So go ahead and create those or set those as appropriate, click Save Permissions, and then that will go ahead and set those permissions for other people to have access to for utilizing the CMP. So securing the environment. As you all know, Configuration Manager has its own role-based administration. And I would just show you part of the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager, or the Configuration Manager portal, role-based access control, role-based administration. So do you need to use both of those? So that's a common question. And the cool thing is that you don't need to. If you're a customer who has not invested any time or very little time into Configuration Manager's role-based administration, so in other words, you only have a small set of people that are allowed to utilize the Config-Man console because they don't have login IDs or administrative users in Config Manager, then you don't need to invest any more time in that. You can control that through that process I was just showing you. Create security groups and then set security rights on those security groups and what they can do inside the Config-Man portal. And what will happen is that when you create things in the CMP that are related to Config Manager, like a deployment or creating a collection or creating a piece of software task sequence, we'll utilize that app pool identity account as the account in Config Manager that would do the work. So what you would need to do is to make sure that in Config Manager, when you look at your security settings, you need to make sure that that app pool identity account, which is right here for me, CMP account, as you recall, I did that for the trial environment that I installed as well. You need to make sure that that account is a full admin inside Configuration Manager, and then you can designate which collections you want to have that guy have access to. Primarily, you want to give him access to all collections so that he can allow the ability of creating deployments that would go to root level collections or any collections below that. And then you can designate what security scopes you want to have him access to, either all security scopes or you can just give him the default security scope. So all of the actions that get performed from the CMP that impact Config Manager will get written to Config Manager through the SMS provider under this context. So with that, I don't have to create security accounts inside Config Manager for my users that are in the help desk scenario or any of my other groups. So now I can go ahead and just load Config Manager portal, and let me just load it in the context of another user. And I'll do user 2, who happens to be in my service or desktop support team. And notice that he has access to specific computers. He doesn't have access to the dashboard. He has access to specific computers. But in those computers, you can see he doesn't have a lot of access. Most of these objects are grayed out. He can run external tools, he can do inventory summary, he can deploy software, but he can't reinstall the OS or can't modify user device affinity or clear or clone clients. Doesn't have access to MDT roles or events. On new, he can only do some of the new items. He can't do new MDT roles or can't create new software and doesn't have access to any settings. So I can create my security inside the CMP, but user 2 does not have a security ID within Config Manager. So that's an option for you. So if you have not invested your time in setting up RBA in Config Manager for everybody, you don't need to. You can go ahead and utilize the role-based administration inside the CMP. However, if you do want to integrate the two, so you have gone ahead and invested time into Config Manager for setting up your security, you can go ahead and integrate the two together. So go to Settings as a Global Administrator, go to Configuration Manager, and you have this checkbox, Enable Configuration Manager Role-Based Administration. That requires that users have to have login IDs inside Config Manager, and then we'll look at the software deployment settings, what security rights they have, what collections they have access to, what objects based on security scopes they have access to go ahead and interact with those objects inside the CMP. In that scenario, you would integrate both of them because you'll still need to have Cireson Portal of Configuration Managers, role-based administration to access our menu items, our views, our templates, our deployment scopes, and so on. So you'll still need some of those settings set by the CMP, but then you also have to have login ID set inside the Configuration Manager environment. So that's entirely up to you if you want to do that integration. It just depends on how much time you've invested into Config Manager's role-based access control. Views versus deployment scopes. So I know we've had a number of people that have been confused by those. So they've given a user in the CMP, let's say user 2, access to some views here, like the workstation view. That's the only view he has access to. So you can see my 4 workstation computers. But maybe they don't actually see anything. So they see the view, but they don't see any objects. And the reason for that is it's one of the Config Man portal issues where you have to go in there and create deployment scopes. So you need a deployment scope, in this case for workstations. So you'd have to go in and create a workstations deployment scope, which then designates the computers that you want to have this person have access to. So this deployment scope for workstations is looking for everybody that does not contain server in the operating system name. And then you need to give them rights to or permissions to that deployment scope. So in this case, see desktop support does have access to that deployment scope. So it's very common for people to have created a view, and just for reference, if you're not familiar with creating views, just go to General Settings as a Global Administrator, go to Views, and you can see I've created a number of different views, but you've given somebody either the standard computer view or you've created a custom view for them, and in this case, give them permissions as well. Desktop support has that view. But so they load the view, but they don't see any objects. It's very, very likely that you have not created a deployment scope and given that user, that security, through the security group and security rights, access to that deployment scope. So yes, you do need both views as well as deployment scopes. Another common question is, can I manually add, remove collection members through the CMP? And currently the answer is no. You can certainly add members to collections through software distribution. So if you have the ability of deploying software, you can go ahead and add new members to collections if they don't already exist. However, you can't just natively go into a collection and add or remove members to that collection or from that collection appropriately through the CMP. That full collection management is on the roadmap coming later on this year, early next year. So it is there that we want to do, it just hasn't gotten there yet. Converting from the community edition to the team edition, hopefully you guys have seen that now because I showed you how to do that. It's just a matter of going ahead and supplying a valid license key. If you don't supply a license key, you're in the community edition. If you supply a valid license key, you're in the team edition. You may be in a trial environment, so it may be a key that you're given that lasts for 30 days to test out the full version of the Team Edition, or maybe you've purchased the software and you have a fully licensed key. Now, anything you create in the Community Edition or in a trial environment will be maintained to the Team Edition when you get a fully functional license key. So you're not going to lose anything by trying things out in the Community Edition or in a trial environment and then switching to the fully implemented or licensed Team Edition. You will keep all of your views that you created, all your security settings that you created, all your templates that you created, all your security scopes and so on, or excuse me, deployment scopes. So all those things will be maintained inside your Team Edition once you've done your testing in the community or trial environment. So it's very easy to start and then move over once you decide to purchase the product. So some additional tips and tricks. Make sure that you know what version you're running. So as I mentioned, we're up to version 2.03, and those are different hot fixes to fix an issue with larger environments, as well as a couple things with licenses. So how can you tell what version you're on? Just go to the portal as a global administrator and go to the General tab, under General Settings, General tab, and then expand Product Version. And then down here will show you what your product version is. And you can see here we're on 2.03. So some of you might still be on 1.0, which is listed as 5.01 was the build number, or you could be on 2.0.0 if you haven't installed any of the hotfixes. So we had a 2.00, 2.01, 2.02, and 2.03. So just make sure you know what version you have, because that changes potentially some functionality or fixes some issues. And we do have release notes. When you download these new versions, they'll tell you what things change in each of those different releases as they come out. So just make sure that you're aware of what version you're on. You want to make sure that you test different personas. Just like I showed you here with logging in as user 2, you'll want to go ahead and engage other members of your IT team to test out different scenarios of the Configuration Manager portal with different account requirements. So the help desk staff, in my scenario, when I demonstrate this, help desk can do the first level triage, but they can't deploy software. But they can do the validation that the software has not been deployed, it's not currently installed, and then they would escalate the ticket up to user 2, who is a member of the desktop support team, or user 3, who's a member of the server support team as appropriate. And they would have different rights. So just make sure that you start as a member of the Global Administrators Group, as we talked about, and then you go ahead and validate access by creating security rights for different security groups that you create inside the CMP, as I showed you a little bit earlier. Remember to configure SRS integration. So it's not enabled by default, so you do need to go into your environment and go ahead and configure that. So what you would need to do is go to Configuration Manager Settings, go to Reporting Services, and you specify your reporting URL to your report server. Specify that, and by default, you're going to use your IS App Pool account, and then you designate the SQL Server and the database of your report server. So you need to configure those values inside the CMP, and of course you'll have to go into SQL Server and given the IIS App Pool account, as we're designating up here, we're using that account. You need to give this account rights to DB data reader rights to the report server database so we can go ahead and find reports. Once you've done that, you go to the reports node, and you won't have any reports by default, but now you can click Link Report. If you got it configured properly, it should show you your report server instance, and then you just expand out, find the appropriate reports that you want. Let's say Asset Intelligence and Hardware 1A, and just click OK, and that will go ahead and add that report into your CMP. Then you just go ahead and right-click that report, go to Permissions, and then you designate what security groups have the ability of viewing that report. And then when they log into the portal, if you have access to the reports node, they'll be able to see that, that report and be able to launch that report off. Install the Cireson app launcher on desktops that will use the CMP. That's a common scenario as well, common question and configuration issue. So I showed you real briefly that if you go to computers, you have the ability when you right-click a computer, like domain controller, right-click, and you can do external tools, and by default there aren't any, but I can go ahead and add in external tool like ping, so I can ping that computer to see if it's alive on the network, and it's going to ping by default 10 times. So if it is good, then hey, okay, it does ping successfully, so now let me go ahead and launch off an external tool of remote manage or remote desktop to go ahead and access that computer remotely. So you can go ahead and integrate these remote tools into your environment. Now, in order to use these remote tools, you need to implement the Cireson application launcher. The Cireson application launcher, you'll see here when I go to the desktop, it's a separate utility that you install. You get it from our website along with the CMP. You need to install this on any computers that are running the CMP that you want to use those external tools on. Because what happens is that when you go ahead and launch off or open up the, oops, I did a quit, didn't I? When you go ahead and launch off the app launcher, it gives you by default these 4 utilities: remote manage, remote desktop, UDA, and ping. You just go ahead and take this, like if I wanted to do remote desktop, I would just copy this command line into my Cireson portal configuration manager and then change like the client name with a variable. But I need to have the app launch to go ahead and launch off that tool. So you do need to get this free application called the Cireson application launcher to have access to that. So make sure you have that installed on all your environments. Okay, so that's a few things, and we're almost at the top of the hour, so I wanted to leave plenty of time for Q&A, and I guess I didn't really do so. Another thing that's available to you in your work with the Cireson portal is the Cireson Community. So we do have a community site that's available to you, so you can go ahead and register for it. And on the Cireson Community site, there's a specific section for the CMP Community Edition, where you can ask questions, and people such as our main developer, myself, will be up there answering questions for you. Or on the, if you're trialing the environment, you ask questions, or you've been playing around, you want to submit feature requests, there's an area to submit feature requests as well. So you can go ahead and join that. It's a free environment for you to go join in, access to, and go ahead and utilize to ask questions. Okay, so open forum. So now go ahead and type in your questions if you've not already done so. And we can go ahead and spend whatever time you guys want to going through questions. So I can stay as long as you guys want to go ahead and cover any questions that you have, either for the community edition, or you're trialing the environment, or maybe you have the full product there, team edition, and you have questions on it. Go ahead and jump into the questions panel and go ahead and ask those questions, and I'll do my best to answer them for you while you guys want to hang around. So some questions that we already have in there, answered a couple of them already. Can you convert from the community edition over to the full edition? And the answer obviously is yes. You just supply a valid license key. So you'd have to go to Cireson, interact with our team to go ahead and get a license key, their trial key, which will give you 30 days of playing around with the product, as well, or purchase the product, and then you give a full key and supply it. Another question asked is, what is missing from the community edition, from the team edition? And I kind of showed you that, but the big things are you can't create any objects in the community edition that would impact or be written back to Configuration Manager. So I can't go ahead and create any objects such as computers, applications, packages, task sequences. I can't deploy software. I can't look at reports because that requires me going to Config Manager to pull some data and look at the reporting status. I can't view the deployments node. So I don't get access to the new menu. I don't get access to reports. I don't get access to deployment status. And a lot of my right-click context menu actions on computers, users, software, task sequences are all disabled because those all are not available to you in the Community Edition. Once you change over to the fully licensed edition, you are given access to all those features again. So just as a real quick review here, if I go back to my full screen mode, and it looks like our service. Let me go ahead and kill this guy, and let's do a refresh. Caching service did not start, so let's go ahead and run our caching service. Let's restart it. And Cireson Configuration Manager Portal Hosting Service. Let's go ahead and restart it. So it didn't pull off any computers, but you notice that again, the deployments node is grayed out or locked. Reports node is locked. No new menu. You do have all your settings as a global administrator, and then when you get your objects, the right-click actions are not available in all those objects. Let's see if our caching service has started up. Our caching service has started up, and it has gone ahead and discovered computers now. So now if I go back here to do a refresh, there I got a couple computers. And again, remember the right-click action, all I have is inventory summary. So I don't have access to some of those objects inside the Community Edition, but as soon as I give it a fully licensed key, a trial key, or the fully licensed key, then I'll get access to those. So that's another question that's asked. On the installer, what were the requirements for the installer? And the primary requirements outside of what you saw there, where you have to designate your config man site server. You have to specify your SQL Server database name as well as SQL site database server. For config manager, you have to designate a SQL Server and a database name for the CMP database to be created. And then if you're going to integrate with MDT, the same thing there. And then IIS app pool information, your website information, your service, whether you want to use a service account to log in, or whether you want to use local system account, and then what port you want to use, and so on. The other requirement that I mentioned was .NET 4.5.2. So if you don't have at least .NET 4.5.2 or later installed in your computer, when you try and run the installer, it's going to take you to the Microsoft website to have you install .NET 4.5.2. You can certainly have something later like 4.7 installed, and we're good with that. But you do have to have one of the newer .NET versions installed to utilize the installer. And again, we will keep making iterative changes to the installer to improve functionality as we go through, get requests and feedback from customers. So as you try that out, go to the community site and give us feedback on what you see, what you like, don't like, and so on. And then we can go ahead and any recommendations you have, we can go ahead and look at implementing those in future releases. All right, that's all the questions I have, so I'll hang out for another minute to see if anybody that's left on the call has any additional questions to ask. If not, I'll thank you for your time. Hopefully you found the information worthwhile. If you have any questions, my email address was up on the first slide, wally.mead@cireson.com, or again, you can go to the community website and you can see those. I did want to point you to, let me go to, point you to our Vimeo site. So here's our Vimeo site. So if you just go to vimeo.com/Team Cireson, and here's that video I did on a full walkthrough of the installer for the Community Edition. Here's a webinar I did, a full hour webinar on what's new in the version 2 of the portal. You'll see other people have done a bunch of webinars. I did a deep dive back a while ago on, there we go, deep dive on the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager. This is before version 2, I believe. And then here's a webinar I wanted to point out. What's next? Cireson portal for Configuration Manager. Billy and Mike did a great job of walking you through a step-by-step. Once you got the CMP installed, what would you do next to get this guy to be fully functional? So that's a great webinar to go to. So you can have that in your back pocket And then just again to show you, here's the Cireson Community website. And here you'll see that there's a section on the ConfigMan portal. There's also a section down here for the, here it is, ConfigMan portal community, where you can ask questions and get answers on questions about the community edition versus the fully licensed edition, and then do feature submissions as well. So again, that is it. I see no additional questions in the Q&A panel, so we're going to go ahead and call it a wrap. So thank you all for attending. Hopefully you found it worthwhile. We'll get this video up on the vimeo.com/Team Cireson site later on today or tomorrow. So certainly by Monday you should be able to download it to go through it again, or pass it off to one of your team members who wasn't able to attend live. So again, thank you for your time. Hopefully you found it worthwhile. If you have any questions or anything, go to the community site, or you can email team@cireson.com and reference the webinar, or you can email me directly and I can see what I can do to help you out. With that, thanks again for your time, and you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye all.